Hello, welcome to Chemistry Mindset, Lesson 2.3, Physical and Chemical Changes. So, yes, in the previous lesson, we talked about physical and chemical properties. So now we're going to go ahead and apply those. So here I have a note sheet. I have highlighted the most important topics from this sheet, but I'll go over through most of it here. So, chemical properties describe the way a substance reacts with other substances. For example, flammability, corrosion, corrosiveness is a chemical property, things like that. So, physical and chemical changes, we just need to know that little background on chemical properties, but physical and chemical changes. So, a physical change alters the form of an object without changing what type of matter what type of matter it is. For example, changes in size and shape. Cutting something, breaking something, um, phase changes are all examples of physical changes. And also, I've highlighted there, they can be reversed. Maybe not easily, but they can be. For example, it would be pretty hard to stick a piece of paper that's been cut apart together, but theoretically, it can be undone. So it also, these notes, I've got reactants and products here. That is a good thing to know. If a reactant is the original substance at the beginning of a chemical reaction, a product is the substance you are left with at the end of a chemical reaction. Now, it's good to know that now. However, we will delve much deeper with reactants and products way later when we get to our chemical reactions unit. So here I also have highlighted how to spot a chemical change. Those are some examples like changing in color, a tarnish, which is like rust or such, release of gas like bubbles, and not to be confused with bubbles like if you're stirring a drink or something or you shake it. That's not necessarily a chemical reaction. It is when you add, uh, like for example, right there has an antacid added to water, starts bubbling. That's a chemical reaction. A precipitate is formed. A precipitate is essentially, it's down there as well, a solid formed from a chemical reaction of some solutions. Again, we'll delve a lot deeper into those later. And a release of energy, like light or heat. For example, when you burn magnesium, it lets off a very bright light. So, chemical changes are used to run cars and other machines. We use chemical changes to turn our food into energy our body can use to keep us going each day. Like we said at the beginning of this course, chemistry takes up everything, really. So we're back to this page we worked on in the previous lesson. So now we're going to discuss changes. We have more shortened descriptions of physical and chemical changes. So we're going to go ahead, label each of these as either physical or chemical changes, just as some examples. So first, we're starting off with NaCl, or sodium chloride, or commonly known as table salt, dissolves in water. Well, we talked about this before. Something dissolving in water is not a chemical change because if you let all that water evaporate, you'll be left with that substance. So, number one is a physical change. So number two, silver or Ag tarnishes. Now, we know one of our examples from the notes, tarnishing, for example, rusting, that is a chemical change. That is essentially reacting with oxygen. Like rust is iron oxide, for example. Number three, an apple is cut. There's no chemical reaction happening here. It's just a physical change. You're just changing to the shape, not the composition. Number four, heat changes H2O to steam. So this is a phase change, which means like we're going from liquid to a gas, which is vaporization. Phase changes I mentioned are not chemical changes. They are physical. So this is physical. So number 5, baking soda reacts to vinegar. That's a typo there. So baking soda reacting vinegar, that's two chemicals coming together. They form bubbles, even though they're not being shaken or stirred or anything like that. We know it's a chemical change. Number 6, iron rusting. Again, that goes along with tarnishing. We know that's a chemical change. Number 7, alcohol evaporates. So that is yet again another phase change. Evaporation is similar to vaporization, so we know it's a physical change. And we'll get a lot more detail about phase changes way later in our states of matter unit. Number 8, ice melts. Yet again, another phase change. We know it's physical. Moving over to the next column, number 9, milk sours. So when milk sours, it forms a precipitate, forms those hard chunks. We know that forming a precipitate is a sign of a chemical reaction. So it is a chemical change. Number 10, sugar dissolves in water, goes hand in hand with number 1. Dissolving in water is not a chemical change. Number 11, wood rots. This one takes a little more practice to understand. Just know that it is a chemical change. Something rotting, you can think of it as similar with the milk souring. It doesn't necessarily form a precipitate, but you can think of it as a chemical change. It's reacting with a lot of other different things. Number 12, pancakes cook. So this is not simply a phase change. This is causing a reaction. Like, for example, when you're baking bread, there's a reaction with the yeast and was it the baking soda or the baking powder that makes it rise? That's a chemical reaction. So number 13, grass grows. That's a chemical change. Anything coming to life or usually having to do with life is chemical. Number 14, a tire is inflated. That is a physical change. You're just changing the shape of the tire. Number 15, food is digested. That is a chemical change. Again, everything in our body is a chemical process of some kind. Number 16, paper towel absorbs water. Again, you're essentially think of it as like you're changing the shape of the water, changing its container really. I'm gonna go ahead, scroll down here. It's got some examples, and we have to label it as physical or chemical. So, number 1, an ice cube is placed in the sun. Later, there is a puddle of water. Later still, the puddle is gone. This is just the phase change. It's melting and then vaporizing. Phase changes are just physical. So two chemicals are mixed together and a gas is produced. That is literally in the name. It's a chemical reaction, chemical change. Number 13, a bicycle changes colors as it rusts. We know a change of color is a chemical reaction. Number 4, a solid is crushed to powder. We're just changing the shape of the solid. It's a physical change. Number 5, two substances are mixed and light is produced. We know when light is produced, that's a form of energy being produced. It's a chemical reaction. Number 6, this one's a bit tricky. A piece of ice melts and reacts with sodium. So ice melting is a physical change. However, reacting with sodium is a chemical change. So this is actually both physical and chemical. So we're going to write PC, and this is the only one like that. But number 7, mixing salt and pepper. It's just, you're not chemically combining them, you're just kind of mixing them in like a bowl or whatnot, just a physical change. There's no indication that there's a chemical process going on here. Number 8, chocolate syrup is dissolved in milk. You're just changing not the composition. You're changing the color, but a reaction is not taking place that is changing the color, if that makes sense. Again, you will understand this the more that we do these. Number 8, our marshmallow is toasted over a campfire. When we're cooking something, that is a chemical change. We know from the cake example. And number 10, a marshmallow is cut in half, just changing the shape of the marshmallow. That is physical. All right. For now, that is all you need to know about physical and chemical changes.